All right, Ollie, welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast. How you going, brother?
Mate, I'm very good. Thank you for having me. This is an honour. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's cool. Hey, I appreciate you coming on, mate. I appreciate you coming on. It's good fun, the podcast, and I know you do. You do a little bit of a drive to work, so I think I get to land in your ears sometimes. My guests coming on. Is there anyone in particular before we get started that you liked, Ollie, on the podcast?
Mate, I've actually probably listened to every single one of your podcasts. I have about an hour and a half drive, and being a young father, it's actually the only time I get to listen to podcasts. I'm out the door before 5, coffee, hour 20. I just bought a new car, big 7-seater. The audio's good, so this is one of my favorite things. I actually get fired up in the morning, and just to kind of get in my golf coaching brain. Most of the time I'm putting on golf podcasts. I know it sounds a little sad, but this is one. Oh, I mean, obviously you've had so many great guests, Riggs, Kerrod Gray, Keith Bennett, Regan McGovern. I really enjoyed, was it Jordan Potts the other day?
Yeah, Jordan was good.
Potts.
Yeah.
I think there's so much to learn from stuff like this. I think I've probably learned more from your podcast than I ever did. Hopefully no one from the PGA is listening to this.
No, I'll say it.
In my traineeship, there's just so much gold, right? So I really enjoy it. One thing I'm not going to do is listen to myself, though. So I'm going to have to chuck something else on, maybe put the Spotify on for a change.
Yeah, it's hard to listen to yourself. I actually have like an AI thing now that helps him pick the clips for social media, so I don't have to listen to it. So my assistant, she'll send me like the AI clips and say, which ones do you want? I just go, these three will be fine, thank you. So I don't have to listen to myself speaking. But it's interesting when you talk about the education, right? So people listening to this, obviously we have lots of golf coaches that do listen and, lots of, very keen golfers. And the one thing I'll often say to people is that, we have golf coaches and then we have golf coaches, we have physios and then we have physios. And what I mean by that, without being too, rude to everyone, kind of blanket us all in one area, is that there is no doubt that to be a good, successful golf coach, that you need to future study or be a keen student of the game. Like, because once you finish your traineeship, right, we all come out with the same ticket, right? We're all a certified golf professional, as we were talking about in the prenup here, right before we recorded the podcast. And not every golf coach is the same, right? So I think it's important to keep moving your study forward and keep listening to lots of stuff, don't you reckon?
100%. I mean, I'm probably a good case of that, because for where I was when I was 26 compared to now, I mean, I think I've heard you say on the podcast, it's like coaching for a case of beer on a Friday afternoon, right? Compared to dedicating your life to your craft, right? And I think for any young coach listening, don't be afraid to kind of take the leap if that's what you're into. Reach out. I mean, you and I get a lot of young pros, and you obviously have your mentor program, but I think if you got to realize, like, we're really happy to pass on our knowledge because you know how quick you can improve a young coach. So my trainee or a young fellow that's working for me, who's ironically older than me, but he's just a second year trainee, but he would have learned so much more from shadowing my lessons than he would learn from the swing theory side of things. And that could even be like the other day, I shadowed a lesson he did. He did a great lesson. He's a really, really good young coach. And then at the end, I'm like, yeah, it was a great lesson, great swing theory, but you didn't even ask what sort of lesson they could have wanted a putting lesson at the start, Like you gotta kind of understand their why and how much they're practicing, and just all those sort of nuances you get from putting time on the mat and in the trenches, as I say, is like you have to put the hours in. Like, I thought I was good when I was young. I wasn't. Like, you probably are the same. Like, you got to put the hours in to kind of find all those little touches everywhere. So,
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, Andreas put it pretty good in a recent podcast about how when he was young, he thought he knew everything, and now he thinks he knows less than what he knew then, as a kind of a thinking point of view. But you definitely, young and confident when you first get started, and the more you learn, the more you realize that, how little you do actually do know. But let's get into it, right? So let's get into the Ollie Neave story, right? And I think you've got a unique background into how you come into coaching as well. And so you teach out at Moore Park driving range. For people listening, obviously we have a lot of international listeners, right? Can you explain to us what the Moore Park facility is and what it's like?
So Moore Park is the closest golf course to the CBD, essentially, in Sydney, Australia. It is, I believe, the second busiest golf course. Golf club, 18-hole golf course, short game area, driving range. Now, if you ask me how the business works, I still don't know. There's like 4 different entities. You got golf club, management company, the trust, the government, and then we're all contractors. So I don't know who my contract's with, but it's essentially just like the place to be in terms of people rolling through the door, beginners, anyone who kind of young professionals that live in the city, all that sort of stuff. So what's been amazing about it is they really kind of let you do your own thing there, and I think it's quite unique. There's not that many teaching jobs in Sydney, as you probably know, where you can teach full time and that's all you're doing. Most golf courses, you have to be like putting your 20 hours in the shop and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's obviously been in the news a bunch lately because they're trying to cut 9 holes. So,
yes,
that is quite big news at the moment. It took us by surprise. So we'll see what comes of that. But yeah, it's definitely the best place I've ever worked for sure.
Yeah, so people listening, Moore Park is, I would just call it like the hub, right? There is, I teach a driving range, right? There's 6 or 7 bays. Where you teach, how many bays are at Moore Park?
Good question. I think there's 3 levels and there's about, 25 mats on each one. And there's a lineup all day, every day, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
It's crazy. So
it's a hard one as a golf coach because I don't, as we'll sort of get into, like I'm fully booked and always have been since I've been there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's just from there's a lot of volume going through the door, and it's probably a bit of both. But it's like there's better facilities for sure, but in terms of like what I'm trying to do and grow the culture of the game and that kind of thing, it's the perfect spot for me for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a high volume there that you see of people, hitting balls there. I often see just stuff from your Instagram there, and just kind of see you walking in and out. And it's a really crazy type of facility. A lot of people listening to this, it's a very rare type of facility. There isn't many like that around.
There's a bit of identity crisis there as well. Is it an entertainment spot, or is it like you kind of have a bit of both? So for me, I do a lot of my coaching in the mornings. I start pretty early. I don't like teaching at night just because not that I don't like it, but I can definitely see the sort of change in dynamic of like the music comes on and big groups of people. I kind of lose my focus a little bit. So try and get in, me and Bobby, first thing in the morning and just sort of smash it out and go from there. But it's a great place to work. And similar to you, like I had come from out of my time and sort of was thinking like, all right, to be the best coach, I need to work at the Eleanoras, the Pimbals, and have my studio. And it's like, in this day and age, like you can, if you think outside the box as you and I have, there's a lot of opportunity. And I get job offers. You probably do as well. And I'm not leaving. Like it's great. I love it there. So
it's like anything, right? If the information is good, people will come. It doesn't matter where it is. Like if people want to get better at golf and they're receiving good information, they don't really care too much where you are. They would like it to be quantified a little bit or surrounding some data, I guess, information, and not being just willy-nilly told. But if the information is good, they will come. Take a look at Genghis, mate. Genghis teaches out of that. The mats are always sliding around. He's in his thongs, He uses blow-up balloons instead of connection balls. Like, it doesn't matter.
I don't think it's that hard to find out as well. Like, game recognizes game. Like, you could probably figure out the 12, I wouldn't even say best coaches because it's so objective, but you can tell the top 12 that give a shit, like, that care the most, that work the hardest, and it's not that hard to, like, ask around and, you can figure out pretty quick who's trying to be innovative and works hard on their craft, I believe. But.
So I've got some, and I was kind of thinking about, what questions I'm going to talk to you about, and I've got a list of things here, right? And one of the things that got me started was, I remember when I was at Longy, like back in the day, right? And I'm talking 15 years ago now, and that Long Reef Golf Club in Sydney and Collaroy, and you were at Mona Vale Golf Club, right? And you were playing in their pennant team there. If I'm not mistaken, that was a pretty good pennant team, right? There was a lot of good young players there. Is that right?
Yeah, it was pretty hot. I was either playing on the pennant team or I wasn't good enough to be on the pennant team. I remember the same year that I won the New South Wales Schoolboys, so the state junior championship essentially of schoolboys, I didn't make the Eric Appley team. So think about that. So
it's an unbelievable amount of golfers there on. We don't need to go through them, but there was some great golfers there. What I want to talk to you about was, do you think being in that environment with a lot of those good golfers around helped kind of push you up along?
Yeah, 1,000%. And I've thought about this a lot. Look, you had 3 golf courses on the Northern Beaches. For those listening, like TOBY was at Long Reef. Mona Vale is probably the closest course, maybe 15 minutes down the track. And then about a minute away is Bayview. So they're probably the 3 courses around. And then often guys would sort of go to Monash as they got older, the Adam Grooms and Tim Stewarts and whatnot. But Mona Vale, we won the major pennant, which is really hard to do in a time when most other golf courses have imports. So Mona Vale was all homegrown, and we're playing against New South that had all like not one homegrown player, right? So I thought about that a lot as a golf coach later, and it was really interesting, the environment, and it was that kind of, have you ever read like Bounce or Talent Code or any of those books? You're not a big reader. Yeah.
Oh, I am a big reader, but I read more like Buddhist books and self-help books and Dalai Lama. Not. They're
also good. Good. I read one the other day, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, keep going.
That's all too. So this book, it's a Bounce or Talent Code. It was like a ping pong player, essentially Matthew Saeed, and he's sort of big on the product of practice over talent. So, if you look at marathon runners, they're all from the same region, and the best ping pong players are all from the same town because they were practicing against each other. So they had their 10,000 hours before, you think they're prodigies, but it kind of just pushed you to greater heights. So for Mona Vale, we sort of had 3 age levels, and the older kids were really good. You're talking like New South Wales amateur champion, that kind of stuff. My age group, and then under me was like the Kyle Grants, the Dale Brand Richards, the Alex Peets, all future pros and like New South Wales state team players. So we just thought it was the norm, and we kind of pushed each other, and the chipping greens, the chipping comps. It's like, I thought I was an absolute hacker.
Yep.
And, I'm like a scratch player, which, at Long Reef I might have been the shit, but at Mona Vale, I'm the 10th best player there. So, someone like Kyle who can just roll it, like learning at 14 how to putt from a guy like that. It's just like, I look back
I really enjoyed Kyle's company. So let's talk about that environment though. And it's one of the things that, I've often, kind of heard a bit, from my friends in Scotland and UK talk about as well, about creating these environments and these types of academies and practices for kids, because when we're kids, right, that's how a lot of the time we grew up. We grew up around people listening to this, right, who have played golf from a young age. We grew up playing against our buddies. We grew up playing 9-hole matches. We grew up playing, chipping competitions for a Mars bar or all this type of stuff, or push-ups or whatever it had to be, right? And then for some reason that when we turned pro, and especially since the Instagram world, we've become a lot more, I think, technique obsessed and starting to blame technique and not repetitions or not the certain types of training that we do. And I think when we reflect on that, and I look at how you your situation being at Mona Vale at a young age and that environment it created, I think there's a lot that we can definitely learn from that and definitely help encourage people to still go down that route. You even see now, right? Like Mickelson will play money matches, with the players on tour, and it's getting away from that kind of typical type of just smashing balls and just training.
Kind of. I'll tell you a funny thing about Mona Vale. We didn't have a driving range, right? So if you think about anyone who's ever come from Mona Vale, me, Rosetta, Dale Brown, Richards, Cole, they're all ball strikers. Like, we don't have great short games. Like, if you think about everyone's strengths from that kind of ilk, like, we're all very good ball strikers, which baffles me. I still can't figure it out. And then when I went to work in England, they had the best driving range ever, and none of them can hit it good. They're all like, I was like, it's so strange. But we used to skip school and play. We're 15 skipping school, playing $100 a hole against good, so talk about like toughening up. That was a good which we didn't know at the time, but looking back now, I'm like, oh, that was awesome.
But when I hear that, right, and I hear people who are playing golf a lot more and they're ultimate ball strikers and the person who's a range rat isn't, one thing I will say there, right, is that the person who's playing golf a lot more is probably not going to experiment as much. So if that player has got a good pattern, right, and say they're hitting a little 5-yard fade, right, or a 10-yard fade, 15-yard fade, right, that golfer who is doing that on the driving range is going, you know what, I'm not actually liking this pattern. I want to try and change it. Where the person who's playing with that 15-yard fade is just trying to score. So when you're playing against the boys of an afternoon, you're like, I'm not going to try and change this because I'm going to duff it and look like an absolute chopper. So I'm going to make sure that this 15-yard fade is going to work. So you really
don't care, right?
Yeah, but because you want to get the ball in the hole, right?
Sure.
So if you happen to move it left to right, and that's what's happening is moving 15 yards and you're playing for a Mars bar, you're going to make sure that 15-yard fade is going to work. You're not going to try and experiment and try flex your wrist and try get cuppy extension. You're not trying to fuck around with it, right? So I think there's something in that potentially can be done. But one thing I want to say there, right, you mentioned about England. When did you go to England?
I went to England as soon as I finished my traineeship. So, were we trainees the same year? Were you a first year when I finished, right?
I think I was a bit behind you.
We were like Campbell and that kind of stuff, yeah. So, I had a weird trainee career where I kind of had enough really good results to be delusional enough to think I could play, and it was often in like pretty big spots. So I also wanted to travel. So, I always tell people you had Kerrod on before. I mean, like, I feel like I was Kerrod back in pre-internet in terms of I left with my golf clubs, packed shirts in there, one-way ticket, credit card, in debt already. And, just kind of hit the road and tried to play wherever I could. So I went to tour school, Euro Pro, which just folded. So I played the Euro Pro and the Alps Tour. So I ended up staying for a couple of years and caddying in my off weeks and traveling and playing. And, for me, it was sort of like a vehicle. I probably knew pretty quick that I wasn't good enough to play and make money for a living, or I didn't have the desire, but I really loved traveling and I liked the opportunities and the life golf could create for me. And I kind of, in a weird way, I kind of like the struggle. It was like this weird, sick kind of like, okay, I got no money. It's like, let's try and figure out how I can play and travel for as long as possible on no cash.
Interesting.
But I had a ball. Yeah.
And when you're young, right, you've got no responsibilities, no one to kind of worry about. It doesn't matter if you come back in debt. It's you got a little bit less on the line as well, I guess, right? But tell me, right? So that must have been. So I finished in 2011, right? My traineeship. So you must have went over there in about
2011. I went
2011. So
the Open.
Fast forward, right? That to me is one of the most wildest stories of my whole entire life, right?
Yeah.
Before we get into the Open Championship, right? How did you get connected in that? What was happening? Were you teaching somewhere? Who did you meet? What was going on there?
A funny story. So it goes back to kind of the Mona Vale thing. We had a guy come over for a summer and he looked for, which courses have the best pennant teams? So this English guy came over. He's like, ended up becoming really good friends. His name's Tom Wild, who ended up playing, did he play an Open? He might have played an Open. He was a pro, sort of played Challenge Tour events in the end. He couldn't even crack the pennant team. So he's ended up playing on the Challenge Tour and he couldn't even make the Mona Vale junior pennant team in 18, right? So we became really good mates. And then when I went over there, his dad, Chris, we became good mates and he was like, stay with us. And anyway, it turns out he was getting coached from a guy called Rob Watts at Castle Royal Golf Club. Now, when I went over there, Rob turned out to be actually a tour coach really big with like, he was sort of like England junior. He still is. Like, I think he's the England amateur coach now. Big on sort of performance stuff, right when Luke Donald was kind of hitting off. So he was actually Darren Clark's swing coach at the time.
Okay.
And, I was sort of, part of me practicing there was working for him and shadowing him and picking up range balls and that sort of stuff. And, I was sort of playing, but I knew if I wasn't playing, I wanted to coach. So it was like really good for me just to shadow him and learn, right? Yeah. And, do you want me to go through the Open with you? Yeah.
Yeah, so 2011, right, for people listening, right, it's when Darren Clark goes and just starts leading in the second round. I think he's up by 3 shots, right? And I think he's tied for the lead after the second round. And everyone wants him to go well, right? Because he's Englishman, hasn't won a major championship yet. And then he goes wire to wire and ends up winning. I think he wins it by 3 shots, right? Out of absolutely nowhere. I'm not a betting man, but I'm assuming he would have been a fair bit on the ranks, right? Can you tell me, so then do you go to the Open Championship with Darren Clark?
So how it happened, I got a phone call from Rob maybe 9 p.m. the night before the Open. He's like, what are you doing tomorrow? He's like, I'm like, oh, obviously nothing. He's like, I'll pick you up in 5 hours. So we drove to St. George's. He's like, I had a spare spot. Can you work for me this week? Like, there's a spare spot at the accommodation. So Darren's put him up at this big sort of house that, part of his team and his nutritionist and all that sort of stuff. There was heaps of people in this house. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to the Open, like first major for sure. I kind of went to the BMW and shadowed him there. And so we get up. I was like, I think I was telling this story recently, and I had $100 to my name, £100. I'm like, well, he's putting me up for the week. I should put money on him. And we get to the range that first morning, and he hasn't broken like 75, or he's just playing horribly, right? And if you go back and look at the scores, he shot 2 under that first round, even though like he was just chopping it on the range. But I ended up not putting money on him that week. And as soon as he shot 2 under, I knew it was, if you're a betting man, it's curtains. You're like, okay, that's done. He's won it from here. But in terms of, and I was walking around like with his wife and his family, and there was no one there on the Thursday morning. So it was kind of weird seeing that. And then I'm like a pig in mud, right? I'm going to watch, like, as soon as I walk out on the golf course, I don't know if you remember this, I'm like, oh, I want to go see Tom Watson. The clubhouse and, like, the 4th hole is so close. I went out to the 4th hole, he hole in one. First shot I see at the Open on the Thursday morning, hole in one.
You're kidding.
If you go back and look at it, it's one of the great hole in ones. I'm watching, Jason Day, Lucas Glover. I was a big fan of Lucas Glover's swing, so I went out and watched him.
Yeah.
And just the whole week, you had, it was just, being a kid from Australia, and it's the first time I've seen all these pros.
Are you staying with Darren Clark in that house?
He wasn't in the house. He was at, like, the house next door, but he had, like, it was like this massive, I could go back and look at photos, like it was just this like 15-bedroom thing. So, I don't really know how it worked.
But what's it like in the house? Because this guy is an underdog, right? Like he would have been one of the highest ranked to go in, right? Like to in that tournament. Mm-hmm. After first round, right, you go home, you're having a cup of tea with the crew, right? Or a Guinness, whatever you're drinking, right? And then you get into the house after round 2 and he's tied for the lead. Like, and then after round 3, what was that energy like within that household of people like the nutritionist, the physio? Were they starting to have the chit chatter like this guy can actually win the Open?
Yeah, it was sort of one of those things that did feel like he was going to get it done. He wasn't actually putting that well, but I don't know if like the Open, if there's any course where like a wily old ball striker can do well and the wind gets up on slow greens, it's like it was a ball striking contest, right? So he kind of didn't have to hole a lot of putts. So it was just sort of one of those things. It's like, okay, if the weather kind of turns bad, he's a chance here with the way he sort of, if you see Darren Clark up in person, it is one of, there's not many people that stand out. Like obviously if you watch Rory on the range, I don't know if you have, but it's unbelievable. There's only a couple of players where you just, this is special, and he's one of them. Surprisingly, he's just like such a good ball striker.
A lot of them are too, right? But he's really good, right?
He's so good, yeah. And Rob's back to coaching him. I think he was seeing the other guy on Skillist as well. He sort of bounces.
Yeah, he jumps around a bit. I think he was Shaheen. I think he might have been seeing the AMG guys as well. I think he...
Yeah. He one thing about Darren is he is probably one of the hardest workers you'll ever see, which you wouldn't think. And he's a big tinkerer. He loves the swing changes. But yeah, it just sort of panned out for him. DJ, Ricky Fowler, they were up there, and just sort of, I think DJ hit one OB, and it just sort of opened up, and he was there never made a mistake, and was there at the right time.
What's the celebrations like?
I left. I had to do a junior clinic on the Sunday back home, so I left on like the Saturday morning.
Oh, you're joking!
So I was watching it on TV, so I was only there like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning kind of thing. So I missed the after party, unfortunately.
And so, what's your friend like Rob after he's coached a major winner? How's he feeling at the time? Was that his first major championship win, you reckon?
It was. He was coaching a lot of players on the European tour. He coached Scott Drummond when he won the BMW from nowhere. He was coaching a few Danish guys. He's coaching a lot of really good young players. I haven't spoken to him in a while. I think he's sort of very good at the elite. He's really good at performance stuff. So he's really switched on with, like, he was good friends with Ramsey McMaster, and he's good on like the biomechanics side of things and that kind of thing. So it's not like all swing stuff. It's a lot more performance based. So a lot of England golf stuff. But he's a good fella.
It's just a wild story. You know what I mean? It's just a wild story. And to be, not only be invited to kind of get to, go with the team to the Open Championship, right? But get to find out with the winning team. Like,
I've always sort of been known for having like polarized luck. So I'm very good at kind of like meeting people. I'm good at networking, but then kind of organically and, it would be like that would happen, and then I'd get a flat tire on the way home or something like that. People are like, it's hard to pick, but for someone just out of traineeship, it was a very wild story. Yeah.
So when you come back from all that ride and you do your thing for a little while, and we start coaching again, you start coaching and you just kind of dive in there, all gung ho there at Moore Park Driving Range. Who were your influences, I guess, swing technique wise, or did you have any methods that you had when you got into coaching?
I kind of went down. Well, I didn't go to Moore Park when I got back. I got back, and I'll tell my story another time. But I kind of got back and was not coaching for a while, and then when I went back to Moore Park, I kind of revamped my career. So I kind of have two parts of my career, my sort of pre-30 and Aussie beef, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
So when I kind of reinvented myself, I think I have a lot of influences from then. From a swing point of view, I would say my biggest influence was probably stack and tilt, surprisingly. When I was playing, I was much more of a stack and tilter. And probably a lot of my coaching is... I'm like you. I take bits and pieces of stuff I like. Like there's some right-sided stuff I like. I've always been very inquisitive, so I'm very happy to ask people that are smarter than me in a lot of different areas. But you're definitely an influence on me. I speak to Sammy Phillips a lot. Dwayne Kerwin was my longtime swing coach. Yeah. But no one like. Not like how I've taken Jordan under my wing. I feel like a lot of it has just been on my own and figuring out in the trenches, to be honest, figuring out what works and learning through failure more than anything.
In Australia, that's kind of how it is. We don't have a whole lot of, you hear of stories about where, someone might have been spending a lot of time under Butch or spending a lot of time shadowing here or spending a lot of time with these top-ranked coaches. In Australia, because it's such a big place, right? And like I saw a picture the other day, right, that Trav put up about Australia, and it put all the countries inside Australia.
I saw that.
Did you see that Trav put up, like Greece and Italy and New Zealand?
What was...
I can't remember. I was looking at it going, this can't be right. For people listening, the scale of Australia is just so big, right? And like one of my students literally hit me up the other day and said, I'm just going to Melbourne with my kids. Is there anything you recommend? I said, bro, Melbourne's a 10-hour drive from my house. You know what I mean? Like, it's not around the corner, dude. And So what I'm getting at with this, right, is that, you know, a lot of us, you know, and I've got a lot of my support, a lot of my friends, like, you know, Stephen Giuliano or Kerrod, you know, these types of people, and my other friends who are coaches like Grant, Richard, these types of guys, right, who I talk to. It might be, you know, just via online, you know, by asking questions and kind of watching, and we learn a lot through, you know, like studying a bit of stack and tilt or studying Morad, whatever we want to go down that path. I guess the influences is a little bit different, while definitely kind of being in Australia. It's no, yeah, I 100% agree with you there. But because we're such a wide scale, we're so far away from each other. Like Karen and I,
do you just like with the top, like someone like Grant Field, for example, like how did you like I made the comment before of like, if someone reaches out to you and I, like, we're happy to help because you know it's part of our duty, I think. But I've also never done it on the flip side of guys that are ahead of me in the industry. So it's like,
it's easy.
Yeah, how do you link with a lot of these guys?
I met Grant. I spoke at the I met him online. Spoke to him a few times anyway before. I just commented on a few things, and I met Grant. I spoke at the International Golf Expo, or Australian Golf Expo, sorry, down in Melbourne, and we were speaking on stage there. And I met him, and I just kind of put him in a headlock. And after about 2.5 hours, I said to him, "You can go if you want. I haven't got. I've stood a lot more questions, but you can leave if you want." And he goes, "No, I'm happy to stay and keep answering them." So I peppered him with multitude of questions. I must have hit him with. I had a list of things I want to talk to him about, but and I still continue to. But a lot of my stuff will be around, right. And, you know, like my friend Jay over in the UK will bounce ideas off, and my friend Alex, a lot of the stuff when I'm communicating with my friends in the coaching world, it's around a certain subject area. So it might be around a trail arm mechanic, and then talking about, you know, what's required in regards to the shoulder, the elbow joint, the wrist joint, and the loading and the unloading phase of those. That's the type of questions that I have with my friends today. And, you know, it's different. So stack and tilt, like my friend Jay, will be all about keeping the right arm incredibly extended through the early stages of P2, right? Where Morad's got that thing folded to like 120 to 130 degrees. Yeah. So it's different. So I kind of will ask those types of questions, and Jay will throw me in a question. I'll throw him a question.
Is that just as like a case study kind of point of view, or is
it's more of a student? Like Jay the other day sent me one about his student who was struggling with his wrists were too ulnar coming into P5, which lead arm level to the ground in the downswing. And I was like, send me what he looks like at P3 and P4. And he did, and he wrote back to me and said, "I already know what you're going to say. Don't worry about it." But I still did tell him what to do, right? So it's those types of questions anyway. So we have those influences. But for people listening as well, like when we talk about stack and tilt and we talk about these different types of methods, I think it's really good in your early stages to learn a system and learn a method, because what it can do, it can help you build a golfer, and it can help you problem solve stuff. So if you work in a certain manner, it's like, okay, when I have, you know, like Stevie Giuliano, right, who might have everyone the same looking, and he sees a breakdown, he'll generally know where that breakdown has come from because he's done that same thing millions of times before. But you're dealing with a lot of the newbie golfer, we could say, right? We're talking before the podcast, right, about our passion for teaching newbie golfers and bringing them into the game. And we're talking about how
we both love it. We both love it.
Love hundreds of newbies. Now, what I'm talking to you about, right, is because you teach a lot of these guys, right? Yeah. And I would classify you as an expert in the field of teaching these types of people because of the high volume you've done. Do you have certain methods and checkpoints and things that you're kind of looking for when you're getting a newbie golfer?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sort of lucky in the fact, well, in an ideal world, we can have multiple lessons with someone and kind of break it down, right? Being at Moore Park, you have to get results, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't be booked out. Like, I have to kind of balance like my own preferences, but then also like you got to be hitting it good pretty quickly, otherwise they're going to go to someone else, right? Yeah, which is actually great because I kind of figured out like the quickest way, as you have said multiple times, the best coaching is getting there quicker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of figured out like, sometimes like I probably wasn't wrong in my first year saying X, Y, Z, but I could have probably skipped that and fixed another domino piece that would have got there quicker. Like I didn't have to bring up P5, P6. Like I could have just got them more structured at the top, and it would have happened more organically. But I mean, I'm definitely more biased towards. I guess I've sort of lately been breaking it down into sort of 3 parts, and my sort of non-negotiable is setup. You talk of that a lot. I work on that constantly, all day, every day, which is not the most exciting thing as a golf coach, but definitely is just so vital, and there's no excuse just to kind of skip that step. I think that I spend a lot of my time working on setup, spend a lot of my time working on P7, working backwards, working on ball flights. I've become a lot more biased between just sort of, I guess, P1 to P2, like getting organised early, as you said on your last podcast. I figured out like a lot of the issues stem from those 2 areas. And, I just end up doing a lot of sort of P3 to P9, a lot of like just getting structured, getting the pivot, separating the 2, especially in clinics. Like I'll spend a lot of time working pivot, a lot of time working arm structure, and just try and bring them together. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I hear you there, like you mentioned something at the start there, which I think was very valuable in regards to skipping over things that didn't matter. And, it's one thing that I've definitely done in my coaching as well. I would say the biggest growth for me is, when I was giving a golf lesson and I might have been too method driven, and I would say something along the lines of, I need you to be here, need you to be there, need you to be here, right? Need all these types of things to happen. But now what I spend a lot of my time doing is asking myself questions is what I'm telling this person going to be really impactful and improve P7 the most? Where does their attention need to be? Like, does it really matter that their right foot is not exactly where I want it? Does it really matter that their knee flex is not exactly, is it really playing an incredibly major role in regards to improving impact? And one thing I will say to people, it's like, for a golf coach listening or someone, is you got to work, I look at it as getting the engine started in the car is so important. And don't get me wrong, you want to make sure the tires are pumped up nicely and it's got window tint so you don't get sunburnt. But is that as important as the engine getting started? Do you know what I mean? And it's not. We want that car ticking over and rolling. So when you're working with a newbie golfer there, and like I see you do a bit of stuff there around about like obviously low point control, right? So for us to have a very good understanding of low point for a newbie golfer, we need to have our weight distributed in the right spot. Let's call it 70% on the lead side at the point of impact, 70, 80%, right? And we need to have their arms, I guess like what I usually like to say is the forearms closely together to help them with low point past the ball. And when you mentioned stack and tilt there, I think there's no better method for teaching a newbie golfer than the stack and tilt method to help them get ball on face and get contact moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think if you can kind of get the pivot like a little bit more stacked at the top, say 50-50, or say like it feels 50-50, it's probably 60-40, but like a little bit more stacked, and have a really nice takeaway and can kind of, face the target at the end and get them just sort of like draw a line on the grass and get them, hitting the grass and looking at divot, and the finish tells a story, right? Like if I can get them sort of extended away from the chest and, belly button to target, kind of go from there.
Yeah.
It just depends, though. It depends on the student as well, right? So I will kind of, when you ask, do I have a structure? I have a structure in terms of like how I deliver the lesson more than any sort of swing model.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And for me, I guess I'm kind of aiming that question more at the person that just can't get the freaking thing elevated. You know what I mean? Can't get the ball elevated.
Sometimes. It's tough sometimes. Right?
Yeah.
But also at the same time, Tobes, like if you get someone at the beginning and they're athletic, I get a lot of young people where I teach. I'm very spoiled in the fact, like I get a lot of young-ish males that are low handicap, and I get a lot of like female 30-year-olds. Randomly, and mate, if you teach someone from the beginning, they seem to swing it pretty good most of the time. Like it's not that difficult.
Yeah,
from the start, getting them in a good setup, and then pivot, arm structure, and it's going to look a lot better than honestly like a lot of 12 handicappers that kind of maybe skipped lessons at the beginning of their career.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that as well, right, for the person with the newbie golfer is that for me, like yesterday, had a couple of newbies, right, rock up, and one of them, he goes to the gym, football background, right, still a young fella, works as a bartender, moves his body really well, and he was amazing pretty quickly, right? He had the ball elevated, hitting at a good distance, doing, ticking on the box that we want. The next guy rocks up, no sporting background, just played the drums. I even asked him if he was left-handed or right-handed at one point during the lesson, and had no sport. So one thing I will say,
I feel like that wouldn't give him much confidence, by the way.
Well, he kept holding it backwards, right? So, but I said to him, what I'm getting at, right, that is that it's really important if you're a golfer listening to this, and you're still in the early stages or whatever, or wherever you are based as a golfer, it's that it's no surprises that people with a sporting background pick up the game really, really quickly, right? So if you pick up the game late, if you haven't played sport, you're going to have to give yourself that little bit extra time. And I don't have any hardcore evidence. There's no studies. It's just from being on the mat and seeing people rock up a lot of the time. It's that it's a very, very, very important question to ask any golfer that rocks up. So if I have any golfer, my questions go is like, how often do you play? How often do you train? What do you do every day? Like, so what's your work look like? Are you sitting down? Are you moving? How often do you go to the gym? And what's your sporting background? That's typically, and you got any injuries, right? How's the body?
Well, and then like, what are you here for? Like, what do you? Because like, nobody's heard more people say, I want to be consistent than you and I, right? It's like, okay, well, like, what does that look like to you, and how much are you playing? How much do you want to invest? Like, why are you actually playing golf? Is it to play at Bondi once a week with your dad, or is it to be a single-figure handicapper, So I think they're all questions. I spend a lot of time asking questions and opening up to students before I pretty much open my mouth in terms of anything technical. It might be 20 minutes before I say anything about their golf swing.
Yeah, interesting. So tell me as well, like, I'm going to say from just watching you, through Instagram, it's that you seem to have a passion for the media side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit more to me? So actually, let's get started. Let's back this up a little bit. Where does Aussie beef come from?
Mate, it's a really long story, and I've never really answered it, so now is probably a good time. But like, as I got back from the UK, I was teaching, and I kind of lost my way a little bit, to be honest. And I was the third IC at Gordon Golf Club, which is like your council golf club. So around that time, I was working at Pimble and Gordon, and kind of just, I was really entrepreneurial. I was sort of done, a little bit burnt out with golf, to be honest. And mate, both my parents passed away fairly suddenly when I was 3 days before my 30th birthday. So I kind of went into, naturally, like a bit of soul searching around that age. I was broke, and I was not married, but I was with my future wife now. And it just took me a long time to kind of get back into the game and figure out what I wanted to do. So anyway, I kind of went missing. I was in Mexico. I'd put on about 40 kilos. I was eating tacos, drinking every morning, weighing about 120, grew a big orange beard, right? Part of the reason I grew a beard was because I worked at a private golf club that didn't allow facial hair. So when I got back, do you know Dean Marr?
Yes, I do.
I probably shouldn't be saying this, but yeah, he's one of my best mates, right? So he got actually offered the job at Moore Park, but he took the job at Eleonora. They were both up at the same time. He's like,
that's right,
I'm going to go to Eleonora, but I've actually got the perfect guy. He's a little rough around the edges, but I think he's ready for a second chance. And it was on my birthday dinner where he mentioned, he's like, just give him a call, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I kind of like, I don't think I'm ready to get back into golf. It was still pretty raw. I hadn't worked in like a year. And I kind of wrote down all the pros and cons, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this again, I pretty much was at rock bottom. Zero money, nothing to lose, kind of no friends, and like I was like, okay, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it properly this time. Let's give like 110%. So I didn't shave the beard. I went into the meeting the next day. I'm like, this is me. No one will work harder if you give me a chance. And from there, the rest is kind of history. So when you see me grinding, a lot of this is I kind of lived through so much up until 30 years old that a lot of this is like the game of golf. Like I've got this like sick love affair with the game of golf where, I grew up on the golf course. It's given me everything, every relationship. Like I'm talking to you now because of the game of golf. I've got 5,000 students because of the game of golf, and all my friends and money, and everything's from golf, all my travel. So love and hate, it's like deeply rooted in my DNA at this point, and that kind of goes to why I work the way I do, I think. Anyway, to answer your question, Aussie Beef, I had to think of a name, and I was fat and overweight and had a big beard, and I'm like, I look like that beef guy. It was actually my friend. It was my friend Andrew Clark. He said, you look like that English beef, but you're Aussie. I'm like, Aussie Beef, there we go. So
I like that. I
started calling myself Beef day one of working.
And as well, like people listening, Ollie, he's got the big orange beard, and you go follow him on Aussie Beef on all his socials, right? And it's definitely away from the norm from what we have seen, previously. I think now it's definitely more accepted, I guess, in regards to, different types of facial hairs. And I have a similar story. I was 20. Yeah. I was 27 and I had to stop drinking, had to stop partying, and I was traveling through India, and I met some friends there, and I had a bit of stubble like I do now, right? And I said, I like when I got a bit of stubble. I feel like I look pretty cool. I never had stubble, right? I always had to shave, and I always had a shit shave because of my neck and all that. She goes, why don't you just grow a beard? I said, I can't because I work at a private golf course. She goes, they can't tell you shit. I said, maybe you're right, actually. Maybe I will grow it out. So I did. Rocked up to work. General manager looked at me, said, welcome back, Toby. What's that? And I said, it's a beard. And he goes, great to have you back. And that was it.
Yeah. I did that once, and the guy sent me home and said, go buy a razor and don't come back until you shave. So.
I know. It's a crazy. But so Aussie Beef. So Aussie Beef stems from Andrew Beef Johnston.
Essentially, yeah. I actually reached out to him the other day. At the time he was quite relevant, but like he's still relevant now. He's got a great podcast, but at the time he was probably top like around 50 in the world. So even at the time, like it was a little bit on the nose, but it also stems from it signifies like, all right, my second coming of this is like, who says you can't be a good golf coach if you wear a hoodie and dress how you want to dress, and just watch what's going to happen. And I think I just timed it so perfectly pre-COVID, and I think now you can kind of look at this inflection point of I've been wearing Malbon and wearing hoodies for a long time, and you can start seeing the change of the guard. Yeah, I think I could kind of see that coming even back then, and just timed it really well, I think. So
I think there's a lot of golf companies now that are coming out that are kind of got a cool edge to them as well. I had someone in my inbox last night, a new golf company from the Sunshine Coast, wanting to send me some stuff, and I was like, you can, but I probably most likely won't be, because of my affiliations with some other things I've got. But there's some cool stuff. People out there are bringing out some cool stuff. So tell me, so this kind of leads into, I saw you do some stuff at the Aussie Open and doing media. You have a strong love for media, like doing media?
I've learned to enjoy it. Part of my growth as a golf coach and as a human being is I struggled with anxiety really badly growing up, and I could not talk to like a bank teller. I couldn't hold a conversation. There's no way I could do what I'm doing right now. In fact, your old boss, Phil Baird, on day one of training school, it's like quite a funny story my friends were in me about. He was like, stand up and work around the room and tell us about yourself and where you work. And I got up and literally started choking and faked a cough and just sat down. He's like, what was that? He was like, I fully choked. I couldn't public speak. And now I talk for a living, and I
Yeah.
you know, I've had my reps, and I'm a lot more comfortable in my own skin, and I'm a father, and blah blah blah. But a lot of it has sort of stemmed from, I guess, delivering my message. I think the bigger my profile gets, and what I'm trying to do, not just as a golf coach, but just culturally in the game of golf through some of the media stuff I'm doing. I've just really enjoyed it, and I kept saying yes to stuff, and the opportunities have really sort of opened up, and I've been, you know, doing the YouTube and the Aussie Open, doing stuff for the PGA. The Aussie Open was cool. I was pretty much doing like TikTok and interviewing players and kind of doing content that a lot of traditional media is not doing. Ruffled a few feathers, but it was also very true to kind of my own style, and I also had access to a lot of the players because I know them. So it was cool, and definitely trying to set a precedent for, you know, like we have a lot of access. You see like a lot of the YouTubers and that kind of stuff now blowing up. I was just filming in New Zealand with Mac Boucher, and I've got a lot of stuff lined up, and I'm doing stuff with my boy Jono at G-Ball Media, and really enjoying it.
So that's awesome. It's good to have a passion as well, you know, like just away from the actual grind of golf coaching. It's really cool to have that type of passion and, you know, putting together some really nice stuff. What do you think the media could be doing differently, particularly in, you know, call it the Australian media, or how they broadcast the golf? Do you think they could be doing something a little bit differently like this, getting a little bit more edgier with like Ports and Gowie, or?
Yeah, yeah, I guess they could. I mean, I'll give you an example. I did a really good piece of content with Trav Smythe, actually, like, who was a guest on the podcast. Go back and listen. Was that like episode 3 or something, right?
Yeah, Trav's a good friend.
And I was chatting to Minji and blah, blah, blah. I actually think I posted it on my own Instagram. And I was sort of like quick rapid fire questions, Aaron Baddeley, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And one of my questions was, you know, have you ever snapped a club, right? And every single one was like, yeah, I've snapped a club, did this over my knee. Yeah. Everyone snapped a golf club, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Every hacker, every follower we have has probably snapped a club. Minji said she didn't, you know, I believe that. But anyway, they loved it. Like, a lot of the media was like, oh, yeah, I love it. This was a great piece of content. It's like, oh, yeah, we can't post that. I'm like, why not? They're like, well, it's against the bylaws to it's like, you're overthinking it. People want to see these players open up. And this is kind of what I meant about, like, you know, your good goods and your Max. Like, they have more pull now than a lot of traditional media, a lot of golfers. And it's like, they got access. It's like, people want to hear what people like that have to say. And anything to kind of make the game more relatable and just get away from this, like, old guard. I think, you know, like Tiger not re-signing with Nike is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. I don't really want to talk about Live because you've probably talked about it 1,000 times, but, you know, there's definitely a lot going on in the golf world at the moment.
I think tournament golf's got to be a little bit careful in regards to what they're doing, because there's some, you know, for instance, you know, I heard something the other day that it was something like the last four-play pod YouTube video or whatever got more views than the last round of the Masters. So it's important to make sure that tournament golf is definitely moving in the right direction to make it more watchable. Because I know myself, I won't sit down and watch it. I'll put it on the TV when I'm working, but I won't sit down and just religiously watch it because it's just not. It seems to be getting a little bit more boring for me personally, kind of watching it. But
like actual professional tournaments.
Yeah, professional tournaments. Yeah, I think tournament golf has got to change a little bit in regards to the way that they're broadcasting, for sure. Tell me when
there's always old guard and new guard. There's always been old school, new school, and that sort of disparity between the two. I guess my point is, like, you and I have been like, and golf coaches as general, we're the first port of call of, like, we're the gateway to growing the game. So for me personally, I've always taken that responsibility really seriously. Like, I've had clients say, I wouldn't be playing golf if it wasn't for you. Like, the fact, like, I enjoyed the lesson and it was a bit of entertainment, and then now I'm hooked. It's like, great. Like, that means more to me than fixing, you know, someone's handicap from 14 to 12. personally. But
yeah, no, I agree. I understand.
just because it's given me so much, and I want other people to, it gives you so many opportunities.
All right, tell me about New Zealand recent trip. What the courses you played?
Courses I played Millbrook about 10 times, just the one course. I played Queenstown and I played Jacks Point a few times. Yeah. And then I got invited to the Hills, but I had to bail. My flight was going, but I'm going to go back for a good extended stretch later in the year. But it was amazing.
Golf in New Zealand. Golf in New Zealand, how good is it?
It's unbelievable. Have you been?
No, I haven't. My wife's begging me to go, but I just keep going to Bali.
My next trip's Bali, but that was the first time in New Zealand, and I was already looking at real estate over there. It's actually cheaper than where I lived, to be fair.
Probably would be, to be fair, let's be honest. So tell me, what's your favourite golf course? Millbrook, Jacks Point, for the other one, would you say Queenstown?
In the world? Oh, Queenstown?
Out of those three, what was the best?
Look, to me, mate, it's like I'm a big course architecture nerd as well. So for me, it's a lot to do with experience, who I'm playing with, and the day I had. So Jacks Point, the last round I played was 80-kilometre winds. However, and I shot 83, like I chopped it, but it wasn't golf at that point. But
yeah, I saw those videos. You shouldn't have even said that score because you were struggling to stand up.
Well, I was going pretty good. I actually doubled my last 5 holes. So I was playing pretty good, 1 over 3.
That's very good. Yeah.
But it cost me a lot of money. But I was playing with Mac Boucher, though, who's obviously one of the great slingers of all time. And it was a fun day. We had a ball, it was still great. It was in a tournament, but we had a good day. So Queenstown was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed all of it, to be honest. But
and what takes you over there? What took you over there?
I played in the Cello Invitational, which was a 2-day event, and Pro-Am, and then I heard Mac was coming early, so I lined up a few games with him and his boys a couple of days before, brought my business partner, and we just had a great week, caught up with Josh Longney, old friend of mine, used to be in Eleanor, and it's great, unbelievable. I love that side of it. It was obviously hard leaving the family and all that kind of stuff, but also very lucky to call that a job.
You got to get away. Any man listening to this with kids, I know it's always that sense of guilt for sure, but I think it's important to go and have some fun and get away for sure, and especially take some time for yourself. I feel like, as a father, as a golf coach, I'm continuing to be of service, right? And I think it's incredibly important to make sure that we do some stuff for ourselves.
At the end of the day, it makes you a better dad as well. Like, you got to. I have that with clients as well. Like, I feel guilty playing golf. It's like, if this is your thing and you have an hour off and it makes you more balanced at home, then it's just that. There's a bit of everything. So,
all right, we've got 2 more things. We're going to go through some couple of questions that have come through, right? And some of the stuff we've already covered, right? And then we're going to do the back to basics putting segment. Tell me, you're Shannon Davis 2023. You're known as the people's coach. What is this all about? Tell us more.
Shannon Davis is a very interesting story. He came to me last year, who's actually become a really good friend of mine. He's like, mate, you've got your work cut out for you. I'm like, bro, I've seen everything. Like, there's nothing you can throw at me that I haven't seen 10 times before. He's looking at me. He looks like you and I right now. He's like, I'm blind. I was like, what? He was like, oh, yeah, I got glaucoma. I can't see.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, I haven't seen that. And he burst out laughing, right? Like, so from the minute, like, I met him, it was like the ice is, and one of my favorite students comes to me once a week. We're having a ball, high-level tennis player. I coach his kids. People's coach. I think that, like with quite a lot of my students, I'm very close with a lot of my students, and I pride myself on being able to, I think my biggest skill as a coach is being able to relate to a wide variety of demographics, and pros to juniors to, high-level players to clinics, short game, whatever. So I think I'm pretty versatile in like relating to a lot of people. I think that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, I get you. All right, so a guy named Novak DJ. What's your favourite shot and club to hit?
I think I taught him this morning, actually. My favorite shot to hit?
Yep. Like your
Stinger.
favorite shot? Stinger. Yeah, of course.
Stinger. I can move it both ways. I think my favorite shot at the moment is this like little punchy cut stinger that kind of, it's like I can't hit fades. I'm like you, I flip city. So for me, I just feel like I'm hitting the biggest cut ever and it fades like 1 yard and all I do is have less side bend and get my forearms more open and hit down on it and it stays open. So
smash it. All right, my friend the golf physio actually sent a thing. Have you sorted out your trail leg double kick yet?
I just randomly stopped doing it. That's funny. I hit him up a long time ago and asked to have a look at my swing. I actually figured out it was a good thing. It's my way of figuring out with dodgy hips how I can kind of keep my trail leg down and open up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a few things here, Gov. I've covered half this stuff. Okay, this is a good question. Michael 4766, right? You know, if you had to give one golf tip to 90% of golfers about the golf swing, what would it be?
One tip.
Make contact.
Make contact, but to further that, I think it's like just hit punch shots.
Yeah.
Hit punch shots and like, again, just, we was talking about it off air, just like most people would be better at golf if they were just doing 80%ers and sacrificing 10 meters. They'll probably hit it further anyway.
I 100% agree. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that swinging something your hardest or doing something your hardest and fastest is going to be the best technique driven. If you need the ball to go further, just hit more club. All right, last question.
Practice short game, you know.
All right, great. So one of the major sponsors of the podcast is Back to Basics Putting. They developed the Pro Path putting mirror, Richard Woodhouse and Grant Field. Has a 15-degree putting arc on it. It's an absolute gem of a mirror. I use it every day in every putting lesson I do have. Harrison Endicott, previous guest on, actually has one himself, which was pretty cool. Can you give us, in the Back to Basics putting segment, can you give us your number one kind of tip or go-to thing that you do for putting?
I would say use the Back to Basics putting mirror.
No, that's not the purpose of it.
Mine actually got stolen, and are they for sale at the moment? Because I've been trying to get one, and they've been sold out for a while. So if you're listening to this, I'm happy to pay full price, but I need to get my hands on one. I think they're great. I actually went to the US Open this year, and one of the coolest things was seeing Cam Smith on the putting green. And what he does is he actually goes from all sides of the hole. He's trying to get his eyesight in for right to left to right, uphill, downhill. And once he does that, he's good to go. So in my opinion, starting the ball online is number one. If there's a pyramid, that is number one. So after you use your Back to Basics putting mirror and you feel like you can start the ball online, I would probably start adding in some random practice. I saw Brad Faxon do just a really simple one the other day, sort of like your old 12-point drill, and it was 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot. 4-footers and 6-footers are for par, 8-footers are for birdie. And for, a good player, they're trying to shoot under par. So if you go 12 putts, 4, 6, 8, if you hole all those, you get a chance to shoot under par. If you miss one, you're one over. So it's a good way of just adding a little bit of pressure.
I've never heard that. That's really cool. So you're 4 and 6 footers of a par and the 8 footers for birdie. So if you listen to that, if you have a little bit of failure around that 4 footer, you've made a bogey, but you can get that back when you get around to the 8 footers, right?
Yes, correct. So it's just a really good way of sort of balancing. If you set up a little station of like, okay, you do your drill work, and if you're struggling with your stroke, spend some time on the mirror. If you feel like you're rolling it online, then go more to your random practice, simulate what you're going to do on the golf course. So yeah, keep it simple and don't have to overthink putting.
I really like that one there with Brad Faxon. I think that's a really cool way, because a lot of the putting ones that I use there, Ollie, it might go to failure, then stop and start again. So what I like about that is it's kind of like you're beating against bogey as well. So if you just made a bogey in the last, we're not resetting it. we're kind of like, how are we going to get that back? Well, let's get back in the grind. Let's make sure we don't drop another one. Let's try and get one back. I think that's a really good tip there. Mate, thanks for that. That brings us to the end of the Back to Basics putting segment. Support the people who support the Golf Coach podcast, TM15 for 15% discount below. And I think you're in luck, Ollie. I think most people who jump on the Golf Coach podcast and get involved in the Back to Basics putting segment gets a nice little message from the CEO of Back to Basics, Nick. I'm sure you'll have one in your inbox pretty shortly.
On a side note, I've actually transformed my putting. I went to the arm lock, and it is about a month ago. It's the best thing I've ever done. I'm holding everything.
Interesting. Why? Why are you holding everything?
I have because I can start the ball online. I was always very wily, and I could read greens, and my pace was good. I couldn't hold a 6-foot straight putt. My stroke is, I'm Will Zalatoris on a bad day. So,
well, actually, I'll send you a video of Tommy Fleetwood, the putt he held on the last the other day. He's got the heap. Yeah. He won the Dubai. His hand's doing this for impact.
Is it?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. One of the things I will say, Ryan, is about putting, and I learned something quite recently, which is kind of crazy. It makes you think a little bit, right? It's that it was such an amazing thing that I heard. One guy was talking about hand-eye coordination, right? Mm-hmm. And one guy said, well, that doesn't actually go with golf because both of your hands are connected on the putter. He goes, think about darts, lawn bowls, bowling, cricket, baseball. You're throwing that ball. It's all in the one hand, right? It's all in the one hand. So he was talking about with putting, so with arm lock, right? You're kind of taking one out. Do you know what I mean? So you're taking one arm out, and the same thing goes to that new putter that a lot of them are using now, Lucas Glover's using, right? Which is off the chest there. That top one's anchored. It's not anchored against his chest, but it's not doing anything, and he's just hitting it with his bottom hand. You know, so it's something to kind of think about, where it's the only sport where we're kind of relying on that. We always reflect back on throwing a ball, or we reflect on throwing a dart, but in fact, we can't, because we've got both our hands situated on that club. So it was kind of something to think about there. So, yeah, the arm lock, I'm a big fan. Can I even tell you this? Yeah, you go.
So I was going to say that actually, you know, I'm not much of a tinkerer either. Part of it was because my clubs got stolen, and I was like, well, shit, I may as well try it now. I'm not playing and blah, blah, blah. And I started off just rolling a few 30-footers. I'm way more aggressive. I was always being like mishits, hands back, and I was just like, this feels pretty good. You know, it takes a while to kind of get set up and change your eye line and have the forward press and stuff, but my stats back it up. I've been putting great. And just, it's good it just takes pressure off everything else. My chipping's better. Yeah. You know, I've always just not enjoyed putting, and I'm now excited to get to the green. So kids out there, keep tinkering with you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, don't keep banging your head against the wall. But what Ollie's saying there, right, as well, people listening to that, is that if you measure and you collect your stats and they're not adding up, don't be afraid to keep trying. Don't be afraid to keep trying. And one thing I will say in the arm lock, right, is that I was working in Olympic Park driving range many, many, many moons ago, right? And I used to muck around. We had a line loft machine, and I used to get bored and just make clubs, right? I'd make them long, make them short, make training clubs, muck around with them, right?
Yeah.
And a putter came in, and it was when Ping had the changeable shaft, and you could make it really long. And I couldn't get it into my belly, right? But I could get it into my arm, and it jammed in. And I said to one of the club makers there, I said to him, Jeff, this feels pretty good. This is 15 years ago, right? And he goes, yeah, but you need more loft because my hands are in front. I was like, yeah, I know. I said, man, I should look into this. Fucking 15 years later, you know, all these holding putts all these times with I'm like, I should have painted it or something.
You could have painted it, yeah, that would be worth. They haven't been around that long either, have they?
Nah, I just kind of thought of it, and it's the same with Odyssey. It's the guy that sold the 2-ball idea to Odyssey as well. You know, like it's coming up with these ideas and taking it to the big companies. But have you got anything that you want to add to the Golf Coach podcast, mate? Before we call it a podcast,
mate, just catch in with you. What when are you off to Bali? I never get to chat to you.
I'm off to Bali. People listening, don't rob me. 25th of March, we're going off. We're just kind of finalising it all now. So we usually go to Bali for a couple of months at a time, but we got number 3 baby due in July, and my wife doesn't want to be in there for too long. So we're going to go in a couple of weeks, but we pushed it back. So we're going to go just a shorter period this time. We usually work over there. Looking forward to it. When are you going?
I've never been. I mean, the plan this year is to do a bit of travel, take the family somewhere. I'll go to New Zealand for a month this year. But yeah, I really want to kind of, while they're still young, go live in a different culture and before they go to school and all that kind of stuff. So I just love traveling. So it's just a bit hard.
I love getting away too. I love it too much, to be fair. Like, I live in the most beautiful place on Earth, right? Climate. It doesn't get much nicer than this, and I still want to escape all the time. One thing, I'm very big on it, and I love the sense of freedom while living in an Asian country because I can get a scooter. I can do what I want. We have a nanny over there, and obviously I work a lot online. Fortunate enough to get paid to the podcast now by a few people, so it's
great.
It's a really cool place to kind of go live over there, and it's good for the kids. It's good for the kids, and it's good for the parents. Yeah, I love it. You don't have to. Yeah, I don't have to try and sell it too much. But people listening, if you need any help with trying to making your way around Bali, I pretty much know the place like the back of my head. I had a phone call this morning with my friend who's going in July. Wanted to ask me about it, so it's great.
You've definitely been my first port of call.
It's fantastic. Hey, mate, it's been a lot of fun. I thank you a lot for coming on the Golf Coach podcast. We want to do this for a while since you got back from New Zealand. We appreciate you coming on. Hope people got to learn a little bit about you and what you do and kind of listen to a couple of coaches just have a bit of a yak. And I got to get back to do some coaching before I pick the kids up, mate. And I appreciate you coming on.
Mate, enjoy. I won't keep you too long. Great to chat to you. Keep doing what you're doing. Very proud of you. And hope you all enjoyed this episode and keep listening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. Peace.
Cheers.